This thin line, which is just barely hugging the surface of the planet.
Anybody else who's ever gone to space says the same thing, because it really is striking and it's really sobering to see this paper-thin layer and to realize that that little paper-thin layer is all that protects every living thing on Earth from death, basically, from the harshness of space.
There's this very poetic concept that a lot of people express, that there are no boundaries from space. And I've heard a lot of my astronaut colleagues say that. Unfortunately, it's not true. You do see boundaries. They're mostly the result of human impact. You can see erosion, clear-cutting of forests, and you know, it's a long litany of environmental impact that we've had on our planet, and that's something which, when you see it from a cosmic perspective, makes you really appreciate the concept of spaceship Earth, and that we're all here together.
After I came back and tried to understand what this experience was all about, I could find nothing in the science literature about it, and nothing in the religious literature that I looked at. So I turned to the local university and asked them to help me with what I saw. And when they came back to me a few weeks later and said, well, in the ancient literature, we found a description called Salvakapa Samadhi. And they said that means that you see things as you see them with your eyes, but you experience them emotionally and viscerally, as with ecstasy and a sense of total unity and oneness. And I said, well, that's exactly what the experience was. And so it's rather clear to me as I studied this, it wasn't anything new, but was something that was very important to the way we humans were put together.
Many of the great wisdom traditions of the Earth have pointed to what we're calling the overview effect. That is to say, they have realized this unity, this oneness of all life on Earth and of consciousness and awareness.
Within the Western tradition, I think it's quite new and quite shocking, because there's been much more of a sense of separation. But if you look at other non-Western cultures, especially in Asia, the emphasis on those has always been on realization that the self and the world are not separate from each other, but that they're really interconnected, that the individual self and the species as a whole is a manifestation of the larger whole.
As you go into your mind in a contemplative way, the sense of the living reality of the planet becomes obvious. You become more in tune with the natural world. This is very akin to the direct perception that the astronauts have. So it's no wonder that many people have likened the overview effect to a spiritual or meditative experience, although it's not exactly that. It's a cognitive shift that very often can produce a kind of meditative experience.
I'm sure we all interpret it somewhat differently. I know some of the fellows go right to a religious explanation. I didn't. I went to more science explanation. And I think all that's wonderful. That's what it takes to build a civilization.
This view of the Earth from space, the whole Earth perspective, I think is the true symbol of this age. And I believe that what's going to happen is there's going to be a greater and greater interest in communicating this idea, because after all, it's key to our survival. We have to start acting as one species with one destiny. We are not going to survive if we don't do that.
We're seeing very clearly that if the Earth becomes sick, then we become sick. If the Earth dies, then we're going to die. People sense that something's wrong, but they're still struggling to go back and find out what the real roots of the problem are. And I think what we need to come to is the realization that it's not just fixing an economic or political system, but it's a basic worldview, a basic understanding of who we are that's at stake.
And a part of that is to come up with a new story, a new picture, a new way to approach this, and to shift our behaviors in such a way that it leads to a sustainable approach to our civilization as opposed to a destructive approach.
It is a fragile planet, and if we don't take care of it and we don't work together, then we are going to have bigger issues than we have now down the road.
On a grand scale, that's, we're basically all living in this one ecosystem called Earth. And everything that you do on one side of the ecosystem affects the other side. And that is a new way for living for most of humanity.
We humans are responsible for ourselves, and if we are endangering our future, then we've got to learn how to do it differently and to go forward into a sustainable period. And right now, that seems very difficult to see how it's going to be, but we've got to work on it.
When I was above the space station, looking down at the space station, and looking down at the, against the Earth, and seeing this, amazing accomplishment, I was thinking, wow, there was 15 nations that worked together to build this amazing orbital complex in space. And if we can, take these 15 nations and do this amazing accomplishment, imagine what we can do by working together, by setting aside our differences for a common goal to overcome some of the challenges facing our planet.
We have this connection to Earth. I mean, it's our home. And I don't know how you can come back and not, in some way be changed. It may be subtle. You see differences in, different people and the just general response when they come back from space. But I think collectively, everybody has that emblazoned on their memories, the way the planet looks. You can't take that lightly. It really, you realize that you've been blessed by the opportunity to see that.
It really does look like this beautiful oasis out in the middle of nothingness. If you have a chance for your eyes to adjust and you can actually see the stars in the Milky Way, it's this oasis against the backdrop of infinity, of this just, enormous universe behind it. And it's, really a very moving experience to be able to see that with your eyes.
You look back at it and it's placed perfectly from the sun to take care of us, and you kind of take that reverse role on about, okay, well, we need to be taking care of it too, so that it can continue to do that for us. And I don't know how you can't have a greater appreciation for it after you see it that way.